There are people who will associate you trying to hold them accountable with you expecting them to be perfect. Because they're trying to convince you that you having respect for yourself and setting boundaries means you have unrealistic expectations of how you want people to treat you. Moral of the story, never let an unhealed person try to convince you that love or like is supposed to hurt.
Colonizers have always used racism as a tool for division. And it's no different now with a coalition government that's funded by the richest people in this country, the literal elites. They're doing the bidding of landlords and corporations. They're stripping the little protections that workers, renters, and poor people have in this country and accelerating the destruction of our environment. Meanwhile, they're telling us to blame Maori for all of our issues, who, like other Indigenous people, are busy climbing their way out of the poverty imposed on them by the colonizer, but still finding time to fight for the environment on behalf of all of us. This makes attacking Maori doubly useful for the government. One, distract us from the fact that they've sold us out to the rich, and two, demonize the main community out there on the front lines fighting to stop corporations from having full control over this land.
Why is it more acceptable to say, "You're projecting," instead of, "I know you are, but what am I?" They mean the same thing. They mean the same thing. You're lying if you think they don't mean the same thing.
Nobody ever rounded up all the kids with ADHD and said, hey, whether you like it or not, you've got a special relationship with energy in this universe. And I'm not talking about the hyperactive kind that some of us have. I'm talking about the kind of energy that double PhD scientists are struggling to understand in underground fortresses in the middle of Europe. You know what I'm talking about when I say that animals and children are drawn to you like a supercharged magnet. They can sense you vibrating at a higher level and want to be part of that. Your restless energy is not a glitch, it is a gift. And your brain processing the world at a speed faster than other people around you can be used in positive ways. You're not only the first person to laugh at a joke in a movie or a TV show, you're also the first person to understand that Adeline is going to cross the entire group. But nobody else can see it yet besides you. Adeline. Your seemingly random and spontaneous ideas are not so random. You are in touch with the creative flow that travels through the universe, and that is a gift. That's what makes us such strong artists and creatives. We can tap into that energy far easier than neurotypicals can. And if you were lucky enough to be raised to trust your intuition, to listen to your gut, that you do have some sort of sixth sense or ESP, let that thing guide you through your life. It is the universe holding your hand and taking you in the right direction. You are tapped into a higher level of energy than so many of those around you. I'm not saying that we're special or gifted or have some sort of superpower, but I kind of am. So if you've ever felt like you've been marching to the beat of your own intergalactic drummer, you're right. You're right. And listen to it. Because not everybody has that.
Why do I have to put up with this? It's so unfair. I think you need to try and calm down. Where are you going? What happened yesterday was completely unacceptable. This is a working environment and having a child tantrum is not okay. But no one listens to me. I'm so frustrated. Enough. This can't happen again. I will not tolerate this childish behaviour and frankly, utter rudeness. Like you're never rude. What did you say? Let's pause. When someone's behaving in an unprofessional way, as a manager, it can be really tempting to tell them off like a parent would a child. This is unlikely to address the issue. Instead, let's get this manager to explore where this behaviour is coming from so they can address the root cause. P.S. For more tips on handling tricky people at work, you might want to hit follow. How are you feeling after yesterday? Upset and annoyed? Tell me more about what was going on yesterday. No one listens to me. I'm so frustrated. I realise sometimes things happen that feel unfair or frustrating. If that happens in future, I need you to come and speak to me calmly and respectfully so we can work out together a way forward. Okay. Shouting and leaving a room without communicating is something I need us to avoid.
PDA is pathological demand avoidance, but sometimes people like to call it persistent drive for autonomy. It's an autistic profile where somebody has lots of anxiety around expectations, around demands, that they want autonomy over their choices, over how they live their lives. And here are 3 really interesting things about it that you should understand. Hi, I'm Sol Smith, and I'm an autistic and ADHD life coach. PDA is one of my specialties, and it's a very hard one to deal with. Very individual needs when you come to PDA situations. So, number 1. Lots of times people mistake PDA for ODD, which is operational defiance disorder. This is because PDA can cause a lot of anxiety around people in authority. It feels like they're just basically being defiant on purpose. It feels like they just don't like to be bossed around, but when it comes down to it, this is a nervous system reaction to somebody who is taking away the autonomy of the person. This relates very directly to autism, but it also relates directly to ADHD. ADHD people can have PDA just as often as autistic people. As a matter of fact, recent studies have linked it more closely with ADHD than ASD. So we're still learning more there. Number 2, PDA doesn't just have to do with authority. Lots of times PDA has to do with just expectations. For example, the expectation of how you're going to react when you're given a gift or a surprise can bring significant anxiety to people with PDA. They might even hate their birthday. They might hate Christmas, other types of gift-giving holidays, because they don't like to have this expectation of how they're going to react when they're getting a gift. Getting a gift becomes problematic for them. It becomes a chore because of those expectations. Number 3, PDA can fluctuate depending on your situation, depending on your environment. So lots of times people say, oh, well, he doesn't really have PDA because look how well he does in this situation, or look how fine he is at home, or whatever. But in fact, it really has to do with your environment a lot of times. Lots of environments will cause significant anxiety when other ones you're comfortable in, where other ones you can operate completely, typically. But you seem to really tense up in other ones. And again, this is because it's a nervous system reaction. It's involuntary. Now, coming up with solutions for PDA is very individual, but you can learn a lot from each other. One of the reasons I've developed my NeuroSpicy community is so that NeuroSpicy people could come together and talk about their problems and their solutions. And we have learned so much in support group. So click on my link and think about joining so that you can try to figure out your way through this maze as well.
Styles typically recycle themselves every 20 years or so, but why haven't we seen a revival of the Art Deco movement since the 1980s? And why can I buy countless pieces of reproduction mid-century furniture, but nothing of Art Deco? Art Deco was an influential design style and really peaked around the 20s and the 30s. At the turn of the century, people were worried about mass production and machinery and industrialization. Because of this, we got movements like the arts and crafts movement and the Art Nouveau movement that were in response to this mass production. It was a way to bring handcrafted work back into arts and design and furniture, a way to really keep the handcrafted look rather than the mass-produced look. The Art Nouveau movement can be recognized as this free-flowy and natural way to kind of bring back nature into design. I also think that a lot of this was inspired by that was popular during the time, kind of like how in the 60s and 70s certain substances created this psychedelic look. After World War II, Art Nouveau was replaced by Art Deco, which took a lot of these natural and flowy lines and replaced them with more streamlined and more machinery type of designs. It was looking to the future, it was looking to these new technologies that we had, lots of new cars and planes and boats. And that's kind of how you start to see this design. Coming into this industrial shift, we see a lot more chrome and aluminum and new kinds of glass and plastics that start to trickle into furniture and design. And you also see influences like the discovery of King Tut's tomb that creates Egyptmania, and in places like the United States where you start to see more Southwestern influences come into Art Deco, and it started to evolve depending on where it was in the world. It's been said that in 1925, the term Art Deco and the style was coined during the Paris Art Exposition, but it wasn't until Hollywood started to incorporate Art Deco that it really became a globalized sensation. At the time, Art Deco furniture was extremely expensive and exclusive and made for the rich. So what better place to put it than a Hollywood film set? Now in the 1930s, Art Deco kind of evolved into what is known as Art Moderne in the United States, and it became a more streamlined approach to Art Deco. It was also during this time that FDR rolled out the New Deal, which basically was to put people back to work during the Great Depression, and so a lot of artists were commissioned to create a lot of federal buildings in this Art Deco style, and you have public works such as the Hoover Dam that are in this Art Deco style. Then came World War II and Art Deco vanished. And it wasn't until the 1980s that we saw a resurgence of this style, but it was different this time. 80s Art Deco was inspired by groups like the Memphis Group, which brought about these kind of wacky geometric style things, and also the Miami South Beach's effort to revitalize a lot of these Art Deco buildings. In 80s Art Deco, we saw a lot of pastels in contrast to the jewel tones of the original Art Deco movement. We also saw new materials being used. We saw more plastics and neons and cheaper materials being used so that it could be more mass produced. We saw it come up in Hollywood again with the Batman and Miami Vice, and then it disappeared again forever. Well, not really. I mean, we do have some Art Deco stuff. I see a lot of Art Deco style in a lot of commercial interior design projects like restaurants and bars, and it can be a really cool approach to bringing that kind of vintage vibes to somewhere but still look pretty modern. But if I were to look up Art Deco furniture on the internet, it's not gonna look the same. These are not the same, and we don't really have a lot of reproduction furniture. If you were to look up online to buy Art Deco furniture, you're going to get two things. One, you're going to get extremely expensive, authentic Art Deco furniture, or number two, you're going to get kind of a Frankenstein look of Art Deco. You still get a lot of the same kind of design, like patterns and inspiration, but these are not the same. But if I were to look up mid-century furniture, I can get a replica of this Eames chair that looks pretty darn close to the original. There's so much mid-century furniture. So with such an impactful design style, why haven't we seen a resurgence of it? Well, I have some theories. Art Deco furniture was extremely expensive and exclusive. For example, a Ruhlman cabinet in the 1920s could have cost anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 depending on the materials that were used. To give context, that's anywhere between $30,000 to $150,000 in today's money, which is crazy. I can't even imagine spending $150,000 for a cabinet. Art Deco furniture used expensive woods and veneers. They used lacquer paint, which was expensive because you had to put a ton of layers on it. And also they used marquetry, which I can make a whole video on, but basically marquetry is taking little tiny pieces of wood or tortoiseshell or ivory, depending on the materials, and putting them in these tiny little wood carve-outs, which was beautiful, and which is why it makes me sick when I see people painting over Art Deco furniture. But that is a conversation for another day. And our lifestyles have changed. We don't really value handcrafted furniture like we used to, and would rather opt for convenience in flat pack furniture shipping that can come to us quickly. Mid-century furniture is great for the flat pack furniture system because it can be easily disassembled and reassembled. It goes great with a lot of design styles, and it's easy to move when you're moving, which we move a lot these days. Something like this could not be flat pack shipped. Post-COVID, a lot of our furniture stores have closed, and we have moved to exclusively shopping for furniture online. A lot of our furniture comes from overseas, and so it would be extremely expensive to buy furniture if it wasn't for the flat pack ship system. The weird thing to me is that in response to the last 10 years of white and minimalist and gray, to buy more vintage and antique furniture, which is great. So we're seeing a lot of uptick on the Facebook Marketplace and estate sales, and people want this furniture. But I don't see a lot of Art Deco furniture in this design style. I think it's because Art Deco furniture is still so expensive. It wasn't mass produced, it was more exclusive, and you didn't really have it in your everyday homes as much. And so it's really hard to find a beautiful, like, zebra wood cabinet just on the Facebook Marketplace for 50 bucks. You also have a lot of collectors that specifically collect Art Deco furniture, which is great. It's beautiful furniture, but it makes it more difficult for average people to obtain a lot of these pieces. Which is why it's crazy to me that these people who are flipping furniture and painting over this Art Deco furniture are getting their hands on beautiful pieces like this and turning it into things like this, but that's for another day. I will say that you can find a lot of Art Deco lighting, which is great. I think there are a lot of really beautiful ways to incorporate Art Deco style into your furniture without having to go full in on the Art Deco, but it's really great quality pieces. Also, Burlwood has definitely been making a comeback the last couple of years. It's really great to bring a lot of texture into your home, and I love Burlwood. I have a piece myself. So do I think Art Deco will make a comeback again? I don't know. I feel like there's just not as big of a demand of it. And when I'm saying Art Deco, I'm talking more about this look than this look, because I do think that this is popular. But I don't think that we'll see a resurgence of this look in a lot of reproductions like we do see with the mid-century furniture of this kind until the furniture industry can figure out how to flat pack ship this and manufacture it for cheaper. But let me know what you think. Do you like Art Deco furniture? I personally love it. I love this style of Art Deco, but I'm curious if we'll ever go back to this kind of Art Deco. I definitely think that we have some inspiration, stuff like this. It's still kind of coming around, so maybe we'll see a resurgence of it again, but let me know what you think.
Key to being a non-toxic mother-in-law is locked somewhere within filling your own cup. Fill your dang cup. Something outside of your children that makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled, makes you feel happy. Nurturing friendships, nurturing relationships, nurturing your marriage. I unfortunately feel like a number of the mothers-in-law who are finding themselves really confused about this role of mother-in-law and dissatisfied in their role as mother-in-law, and that ends up meaning they act in a way that comes across as desperate or controlling or with guilt trips. Those sorts of things are women who don't have enough going on outside of their relationship and their role as mom. And so when their kids grow up, they're ill-equipped to replace that relationship with other things. When their kid goes on to be married and starts to live their own life or in a serious relationship, whatever the case is. I get it. That's all easier said than done, but I definitely think it's something we need to be aware of. Okay, I love you. Have a great day.
Giving someone grace is one thing. Saving them from accountability and responsibility is another.
Hey, so a lot of you have been saying that this is like the first thing that's ever been shown on the internet that has shown your actual lifespan. It's this new tool that I posted on Substack called the Neurocomplex Lifespan Model, and it goes through the common prototypical challenges of a neurocomplex being from early on giftedness identification to the twists and turns of young adulthood, all the way to later in life identification of neurodivergence to burnout and beyond. So check it out, something to show your therapist and your family.
You guys are subscribing to cults and you don't even realize it. It is embarrassing. Fashion is how you claim your cult. Fashion is how you physically display your tribe. Fashion is how you claim personhood. In a world of trends, what we really have is an actual culture of non-identity. You have become a paper doll and you are constantly buying new booklets of paper clothing to don some concept of an identity that has nothing to do with you or your values or your interests, because every single piece of clothing you put on your body displays in some way, shape, or form your interest. If you buy an ugly piece of clothing that is visually telling that it's expensive, you are saying my priority is wealth signaling over physically attracting someone. You pay to look like an idiot, and I wouldn't let that happen to a friend of mine, so I will not let that happen to you. If you choose to wear a piece of clothing that is extremely cheap and extremely revealing, you are saying I don't have resources beyond my biological potential. If you choose to look bad in the interest of following a trend, I'll give an example of the bubble skirts, which are literally diapers, and there's a whole conversation about the infantilization of women to be had around that. But if you choose to wear one of those fuck-ass ugly skirts, you are saying, I am more interested in fitting in than I am with looking good. I want to be part of this in-group so bad that I will sacrifice my attractiveness. If you compromise your attractiveness to be in an in-group, you are literally removing your power in the hope of getting community, and you will never get community in today's world of consumerism and horrible fashion. Okay? You guys are subscribing to cults and you don't even realize it. It is embarrassing. I don't mean to shit on people who just really love following current fashion. I just want to iterate and reiterate that current fashion is not art. Current fashion is the industry trying to figure out how to take an artistic concept and boil it down into the absolute cheapest thing they can create and convince you to buy with the use of celebrities, influencers, and cult-like groupthink cycles that they rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat until the end of goddamn time. And if that's what you're into, that's what you're into, but there's gotta be a fucking reality check, because it is unacceptable that we continue bumbling through life in fucking Aritzia or whatever the new hot thing is. I don't know. I don't keep up. I shop secondhand because everything I've ever wanted in my entire life already exists in a thrift store somewhere. The subliminal messaging that you are constantly fed on a daily basis is dangerous, and especially when it is something that takes advantage of your money, right?
They're coming for them family farms and all them century-old barns. They'll charge you till you can't afford to work your family land, 'cause you don't get to pass it down unless you wear some royal crown. Repayment for the revolution, it's always been the plan. They track every single purchase that I make all year long, take a dime from every dollar that I earn from every song. So I'm headed to the harbor. Think I'll just go back to barter. You can book me here right now. I'll sing all night for half a cow. 'Cause the more I make, the more they take, The less I have, the more I need, the more I need, the more I work, more I make, the more they take until they've got it all. That's enough of that.
If somebody that's grown up with a toxic, horrible, abusive parent tells somebody the truth of their experience, their reaction from the other person is always the same, right? The reaction from the other person is to start, instead of going, wow, that sounds horrible, like, that sounds like unlivable, like it must be so hard for you to deal with, people start trying to repackage your parent. Oh, you know, maybe they're not that bad, but they do love you and they are trying their best, and have you thought about their trauma? And it's like, hang on a minute, why the fuck I've just told you that they're horrible and abusive, and you're trying to repurpose them. Why can't people step in and see the truth? Go, wow, this is horrible, let me come and be with you in that experience. Because people can't be with the discomfort of it, because in Western culture at least, we're fucking emotionally inept. That's what I believe.
Nobody tries to humble you faster than someone who feels threatened by you.
Hi, I have a question for all the boomer moms out there. Why? Why do most of you not like your daughters? I'm not saying all, but most. Why? Why did you do that to us? Why? Why did you have kids? Why?
Let's make a narcissist apology from scratch. First, we need a giant heap of self-loathing, because this is difficult for you. Next, use vague ingredients like my behavior or my actions. You'll need 3 tablespoons of I was in a dark place with a pinch of rock bottom. No narcissist apology would be complete without some chopped gaslighting. Remember, before today, this was a smear campaign, but now that there's video, you're disgusted and sorry. Next, let's add some self-deprecation. The more the better. I'm disgusted with myself. I'm so embarrassed. I don't recognize that person. Now, while this recipe includes the word accountability, don't worry, it's actually accountability free. Remember, this recipe is for our audience, not the victim. Lastly, we're going to top this off with everyone's favorite deflections: therapy, rehab, and God. That smells like bullshit. Once you're done, you can scoop all of this directly into the trash, right where it belongs.
So if you didn't get attunement during critical times in your development, your identity development will actually suffer. And what I mean by that is your flexible, imperfect, constantly changing, like emotional, abstract, felt sense of self. In a moment, your connection to yourself will be replaced with something more categorical and rigid that keeps you safe, that makes it so you feel less dysregulation on the inside. If you're an achiever, or you're overly controlled, or you're pleasing, you don't have to risk uncertainty and powerless with yourself in the presence of another person. You don't have to risk defectiveness or abandonment. If you have a nice, neat, false identity, you don't have to risk feeling any of that stuff. And if you don't get attunement, you're not going to know that it's safe to feel that stuff with someone else. So here are the false senses of self that I had that kind of correspond with all the different stress reactions that I'm putting in my book. And I have to say, you guys, this book that I just read is awesome. It talks a little bit about this, maybe in different words. You have these stress responses that are all based on trauma. And you should notice your emotional flashbacks in everyday life and kind of have a protocol of what to do to ground you back to the present, ground you back to yourself. Talks a lot about grief, talks a lot about like actually processing, because that's what you do with trauma. I'm going to add that sometimes detachment from self is because of neurodivergence with misattunements. I see a lot of people that go from fight to flight, back and forth, or from freeze to fight, back and forth. And I've noticed a pattern like those people very commonly have ADHD or autism. There's a lot of neurological reasons, and I'm putting it in my book, that the brain is playing tricks on those people to make them feel an increased stress response. So I'm not going to necessarily say that every time somebody gets dysregulated and kind of detached from self and in a threat response, they're in a trauma reaction. Sometimes yes, sometimes they're having a neuro glitch because of neurodivergence and misattunement. Misattunement meaning nobody has noticed and accepted, reflected back to you, mirrored back to you, so that you could feel in safety, kind of yourself. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Here's my thing about being an enslaved person. If you're an enslaved person and you get upset that somebody's calling you a slave and you're not upset about being an enslaved person, that's slave shit. You understand? That's mental slavery, and you're still a fucking slave. Sorry if that offends you during your phone time that you get to have as an enslaved person. Kind of a hot take, isn't it? Like, here's the thing. People who want you to say enslaved people are not enslaved people. Harriet Tubman said, these people didn't know they were enslaved. But how do you think she'd wake them up? The pistol implies she just said, listen, motherfucker, you are a slave. They have us eating hog maw, grits, chitlins, chitterlings. That sounds like where bugs live. That's slave food.
Here's something to know. Very often, defensiveness regulates shame. Your partner tells you, you did something wrong, you hurt me. Your brain says, oh no, I'm bad. We don't like to feel bad. So to get away from that I'm bad feeling, you start doing defensive stuff. Yeah, you should talk. That didn't even happen the way you're saying. Your shame comes down as your defensiveness goes up. But here's the catch. Defensiveness is really not good communication. Now your partner has more gripes with you, and they cause more shame. And now you have to be more defensive to regulate that shame. It's a really painful loop to keep getting stuck in, for both people.
Chapter 1. Emotional loneliness comes from not having enough emotional intimacy with other people. It can start in childhood due to feeling emotionally unseen by self-preoccupied parents, or it can arise in adulthood when emotional connection is lost. If it's been a lifelong feeling, it points to the likelihood of not being sufficiently emotionally responded to as a child. Growing up in a family with emotionally immature parents is a lonely experience. These parents may look and act perfectly normal, caring for their child's physical health and providing meals and safety. However, if they don't have a solid emotional connection with their child, the child will have a gaping hole where true security might have been. The loneliness of feeling unseen by others is as fundamental a pain as physical injury, but it doesn't show on the outside. Emotional loneliness is a vague and private experience, not easy to see or describe. You might call it a feeling of emptiness or being alone in the world. Some people have called this feeling existential loneliness, but there's nothing existential about it. If you feel it, it came from your family. Children have no way of identifying a lack of emotional intimacy in their relationship with a parent. It isn't a concept they have. And it's even less likely that they can understand that their parents are emotionally immature. All they have is a gut feeling of emptiness, which is how a child experiences loneliness. With a mature parent, the child's remedy for loneliness is simply to go to the parent for affectionate connection. But if your parent was scared of deep feelings, you might have been left with an uneasy sense of shame for needing comfort. When the children of emotionally immature parents grow up, the core emptiness remains, even if they have a superficially normal adult life. Their loneliness can continue into adulthood if they unwittingly choose relationships that can't give them enough emotional connection. They may go to school, work, marry, and raise children, but all the while they'll still be haunted by that core sense of emotional isolation. In this chapter, we'll look at people's experience with emotional loneliness, along with how self-awareness helped them understand what they were missing and how to change. Emotional intimacy involves knowing that you have someone you can tell anything to, someone to go to with all your feelings about anything and everything. You feel completely safe opening up to the other person, whether in the form of words, through an exchange of looks, or just by being together quietly in a state of connection. Emotional intimacy is profoundly fulfilling, creating a sense of being seen for who you really are. It can only exist when the other person seeks to know you, not judge you. As children, the basis of our security is emotional connection with our caretakers. Emotionally engaged parents make children feel that they always have someone to go to. This kind of security requires genuine emotional connections with parents. Parents who are emotionally mature engage in this level of emotional connection almost all the time. They've developed enough self-awareness to be comfortable with their own feelings, as well as those of other people. More importantly, they're emotionally attuned to their children, noticing their children's moods and welcoming their feelings with interest. A child feels safe connecting with such a parent, whether seeking comfort or sharing enthusiasm. Mature parents make their children feel that they enjoy engaging with them and that it's fine to talk about emotional issues. These parents have a lively, balanced emotional life and are usually consistent in their attentiveness and interest towards their children. They are emotionally dependable. Parents who are emotionally immature, on the other hand, are so self-preoccupied that they don't notice their children's inner experiences. In addition, they discount feelings and they fear emotional intimacy. They're uncomfortable with their own emotional needs and therefore have no idea how to offer support at an emotional level. Such parents may even become nervous and angry if their children gets upset, punishing them instead of comforting them. These reactions shut down children's instinctive urge to reach out, closing the door to emotional contact. If one or both of your parents weren't mature enough to give you the emotional support as a child, you would have felt the effects of not having it, but you wouldn't have necessarily known what was wrong. You might have thought that feeling empty and alone was your own private, strange experience, something that made you different from other people. As a child, you had no way of knowing that this hollow feeling is a normal, universal response to lacking adequate human companionship. Emotional loneliness is a term that suggests its own cure, being on the receiving end of another person's sympathetic interest in what you're feeling. This type of loneliness isn't an odd or senseless feeling. It's the predictable result of growing up without sufficient empathy from others. To round out this description of emotional loneliness, let's look at two people who vividly remember this feeling from childhood and describe it well. David's story. Here's how my client David responded when I commented that growing up in his family sounded lonely. It was incredibly lonely, like I was utterly isolated. It was a fact of my existence. It just felt normal. In my family, everyone was separate from each other, and we were all emotionally isolated. We lived parallel lives with no points of contact. In high school, I used to get this image of floating in the ocean with no one around me. That's how it felt at home. When I asked him about the feeling of loneliness, he said it was a sensation of emptiness and nothingness. I had no way of knowing that most people didn't feel this way. That feeling was just daily life for me. Rhonda's story. Rhonda remembered a similar aloneness when she was 7 years old, standing by the moving truck outside her family's old house with her parents and 3 older siblings. Although she was technically with her family, no one was touching her, and she felt totally alone. I was standing there with my family, but no one had really explained what this move would mean. I felt totally alone, trying to figure out what was going on. I was with my family, but I didn't feel like I was with them. I remember feeling exhausted, wondering how I was going to deal with this on my own. I didn't feel like I could ask any questions. They were totally unavailable for me. I was too anxious to share anything with them. I knew it was on me to cope with this alone. This kind of emotional pain and loneliness is actually a healthy message. The anxiety felt by David and Rhonda was letting them know that they were in dire need of emotional contact, but because their parents didn't notice how they felt, all they could do was keep their feelings inside. Fortunately, once you start listening to your emotions instead of shutting them down, they will guide you towards an authentic connection with others. Knowing the cause of your emotional loneliness is the first step toward finding more fulfilling relationships.
Do you know particle accelerators? So old-fashioned TVs, cathode ray tubes, CRT TVs, I'm literally radioactive black box. Strange signal goes in, picture comes out. I will not break for 50 years. Modern TV, your TV needs an update, please connect to the internet. As the meme points out, this doesn't even begin to cover the weirdness of cathode ray televisions, okay? It's literally a particle accelerator that you point at your face. For 80 years, America's favorite thing to do was to sit in front of these, point this particle accelerator at their face for hours. In fact, the first fusion reactors that we built were based on TV tubes, cathode ray tubes. It's the same thing without a screen. It's called a Farnsworth-Hirsch fuser. It's really easy to build. You can build them with stuff that you can get at the hardware store, and kids do it for science fair projects all the time. So TV and this is literally the same concept. There was this guy in the Soviet Union. He accidentally stuck his face in the path of the beam, and it went through his head. Okay. He was fine. In fact, he was super fucking weird after that. One side of his body stopped aging. He had a lot of swelling. It burned a hole straight through his head. Okay. And then after that, he lived a pretty normal life, except one side of his body stopped aging. You can see this side is old. This side, it did not age in the same way. That's weird.
Today, let's find out who is destroying the left from within. In last week's video, I was sharing the difference between deference politics and constructive politics, two different ways of organizing on the left that Olufemi Otaiwo outlines in his book Elite Capture: How the Powerful Took Over Identity Politics and Everything Else. You may want to go watch that video and come back if you haven't already. But as a quick recap, deference politics ask us to defer to the most marginalized person who happens to be in the room, keeping in mind that just being in the room is generally a sign of major privilege. Deference politics asks us to focus on symbols, feelings, semantics, so wording, and interpersonal relationships. Taiwo urges us to move towards a constructive politics, which is focused on building power. So that can look like creating new spaces, networks, unions, and coalitions, securing and redistributing wealth and resources. Constructive politics are focused on life and death shit, all right? It has global, radical scope, so we're thinking much bigger picture than what deference politics generally does. Now, when I talked about building power, a lot of y'all heard authoritarianism, which is fascinating to me. So some people in the comments were like, oh, so you mean you want to do right-wing organizing, but for the left? But nothing is further from the truth. Deference politics actually sets up a hierarchical organizing structure where all these people are asked to defer to the most marginalized, people who are at, the top of this organizing group. But this person is very easily compromised. They can be assassinated. They can be captured in terms of elite capture. They can be seduced into serving the needs of the status quo and the capitalists simply by being at the top. I think constructive politics at its most powerful, looks more like a union, looks like a leader-full movement, right? Where instead of one person giving everyone else marching orders, dare I say it, you can organize around anarchist principles. Everyone, is empowered and standing together. This is much more difficult to compromise because you can take out any one of these people and the organization is still very strong. But if you don't have this, if you've got, clear leaders at the top that everyone else is deferring to without any critical thinking, then all you have to do is compromise this person to destroy the movement. And so let's talk about, who is actually compromising the left. So first, there are the professional infiltrators. These are people who are paid to push a certain propaganda online based on the needs of whoever's employing them. So you have countries doing this. In Israel, you have Hasbara, pays people to sow discord on social media, spread misinformation, and infiltrate leftist movements, impersonating, someone on the left. All they have to do is set up a sock puppet account with a Palestinian flag avatar and name themselves Queer Palestinian 1234, and they can start sowing discord within our movement. Israel does this. The CIA does it. Russia and China, as our Western media is constantly reminding us, do it. Probably literally every imperial power is doing it. Now you also have for-profit infiltrators. Last year, Haaretz broke a story investigating Team Jorge, two Israeli for-hire infiltrators who used all kinds of these cyber attack tactics in order to fix certain elections in Africa in the way that the people who hired them wanted them to do it, and they were successful. Finally, you also have political groups or ideological groups who are using sock puppet accounts, using bot armies in order to sway public opinion in line with their political aims. So that includes, alt-right groups, overt hate groups, and Republicans and the Democratic Party. I mean, they pay influencers to make ads for them. Whenever we're talking online about any social justice or political or leftist issue, all these people are in the room and we need to be expecting that. Unfortunately, in leftist spaces, predators are also going to be in the room. These people might not be, motivated politically, but you'll find abusers in leftist spaces. You'll find scammers who are looking to enrich themselves off of, other people's good intention. Allowing abusers to exist in leftist spaces is so damaging to the movement because they're going to create a toxic, dangerous environment. But I do want to stress that conflict is not abuse. Just because you're not getting your way in a leftist space doesn't mean that you're being abused. Drawing boundaries is not abuse. Having disagreements, even having arguments, healthy debate, these things are not abuse. And if you're confused about that, I haven't read it, but there's a book some of my comrades have recommended called Conflict is Not Abuse. Finally, you have the probably well-meaning people who can also destroy the movement from the left if they put their ego over the needs of the movement, right? If they are told no, or others in their collective disagree with them and they say, well, then I'm taking my ball and going home. I'm not organizing with you anymore because I didn't get exactly my way. That's someone who's being destructive to the movement because they're putting their ego over the movement. Emotionally immature people, this kind of goes hand in hand. If they can't handle that conflict, that healthy debate, if they can't handle just like interacting interpersonally with other people who have distinct points of view, if they can't apologize, if they mess up and hurt somebody, if they aren't open to receiving any criticism when they may have messed up and done harm, these are all people who can be very destructive to the movement. Even if their politics are 100% behind collective liberation. And finally, there's the status quo lovers. These people are just so comfortable in their lives that they're going to be, pushing your leftist group towards whatever is going to actually not make much of a difference. They're going to be going after those symbolic, tiny victories that aren't really going to disrupt the status quo because they stand to lose something if there's any major substantive change. But finally, the last and largest category of people who are destroying the left from within are anyone who defers to any of these above people. If we create a culture of deference where we don't expect every single person in our movement to think critically and constructively for themselves, then any of these people can just hijack our movement and our allies. Deference politics serves the professional infiltrators. It serves the predators, the abusers, the scammers. We have to stop asking people to defer to someone based on some identity category because there's a very good chance they're any one of these people. And it actually doesn't matter which category people are in. If we've given constructive education to all of our people, if we are clear that our goals should be on building power, that we should be focusing on radical change and life and death issues, then our people are not going to be sidetracked by deference politics. One more type of ego over movement actor that I wanted to mention is the shamers and shunners. So these are people who get off on the ego gratification of putting down other leftists more than they're interested in building the movement and building power. I hope you're enjoying those raspberries for my baby. So these are people who are in the movement really to just dogpile other people and tear other people down. And they are very, very destructive to building power. But the cool thing about if all of our members are empowered, are educated, are focused on building a constructive politics, then we're not going to be sidetracked by the symbolic. We're not going to be compromised by deference politics. And we don't have to figure out, is this person who's being destructive in my comments, are they Hasbara or are they a well-meaning, legit leftist who is just, following bad leaders? It doesn't matter which they are. We're going to just ignore them because we're going to recognize, oh, here's someone engaging in deference politics. Here's someone prioritizing some semantic issues over a life and death issues. And we're just not going to get sidetracked by that anymore. And so knowing all of this, our most important defense on the left is educating all our people and educating ourselves. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to become a leftist leader. Every single one of us. You're going to have to learn to think critically and be able to stay focused on what should be the priorities of the left and have your own thoughts about it. Because if you're just deferring to whoever you think is the, most marginalized person in the room, you are so easily compromised to serve elite interests. So every week we should be asking ourselves, like, what am I learning and what am I teaching to others? How am I educating myself? How am I educating others? As always, if you enjoyed this lecture from the People's University of Social Media, pay tuition forward to the Rafat Al-Arir camp. You'll find that link in my bio. They're providing housing and medical care to some of the most vulnerable families in Gaza. And if you want to be a professor at the People's University of Social Media, learn something, throw up a sign, and teach it to us.
One person is making a spectacle out of a simple act of community service. This is Trash the Clown, a stay-at-home mom who noticed garbage piling up around her city and decided to do something unconventional yet impactful. She hit the town dressed as a clown, armed with trash bags and a shopping cart she calls Carter, to clean up Port Huron. Behind this quirky mom is a deeper purpose.
About not just litter, but how they see the world and how they see each other. We go throughout our days without really seeing the world around us, without really engaging one another. So if we can learn to actually engage the world, see it, then we start to see the litter on the ground. Then we can see how, we're hateful to one another and how we can fill in those gaps with kindness and with love, and how that kindness and love can steamroll into something amazing and beautiful. That's the way you fix things. The world is really noisy, so it's hard to hear good messages sometimes. And so to kind of cut through all that negative noise, sometimes you have to speak loud, but loud in a different way.
Trash is now the talk of the town. But you know what? People aren't trash talking her like they used to, because they see the good. They know the value. And hundreds of her neighbors have even turned out to help her clean up their city.